villages as they affect not only
to dedicate today's tree planting to the health workers as well. And like the Honorable Commissioner of the Environment rightly said, it's also going on concurrently, or it's gone on concurrently at 3 other isolation centers that we have with the deputy and other officers of government, also around the 57 local government. And of course, we've just witnessed the unveiling and the handing over of a morgue that was built by one of our partners in the COVID pandemic, Messrs. IHS Nigeria Limited, and you've seen IHS Towers, and you've seen what our collaborative effort has been with the organized private sector in Lagos State. So you've asked a question around, because I'm in IDH, you've asked a question around the health workers and the doctor strike. I'm sure one of the first things you need to understand is, I just asked all of my health workers here how they're doing, and they all said they're doing very well. As your governor, I have the overall responsibility to ensure that all my children, and when I say all my children, all my entire workforce, be it in the public and the private sector, are doing well. That is my first responsibility, to also ensure that security of life and property is paramount to us. And gentlemen of the press, you will agree that this government, in the last 412 days, that has been one of our guiding principles, and we've been doing that as we go along. However, disputes are also very natural in human occurrence. You know, people might see things differently from one side as others do see it. And so personally, I'm not upset. You know, it's not anything to grieve about. It is really all around communication and understanding, you know, that needs to come with when you communicate with someone. If you understand, you know, you will seek a lot of knowledge once you understand, and wisdom also will come to play. Those are the 3 guiding principles. So when you have knowledge, you must ensure that you understand what you have acquired and apply wisdom to it. So the issues are very, very simple. And like I said, it's just maybe lack of adequate communication. The first thing they said is that we're owing some people hazard allowances. For the benefit of gentlemen of the press, our government was the very first government in March that started paying hazard allowance to our entire health workers, almost 20,000 of them. And what did we do? For the hazard allowance, we increased the hazard allowance by 400%. 400%. You can stand about and ask them. We're the first to do that around all the entire health workers, be it doctors, be it nurses, be it driver, be it hygienists. Everybody that was in the health sector as a worker got a 400% on hazard allowance, has been enumerated in their pay structure. 400%. Over and above that, we also now realize that we needed to give the front line in the COVID-19 pandemic, we needed to give them additional incentive, which we had called a COVID-19 allowance. Outside of the regular salary, outside of the hazard allowance that I said we just increased, but the over 1,000 medical officers and other auxiliary workers in the COVID-19, in all of our isolation centers, to give them additional allowances. This, I did not need to consult with anybody. It was something that I felt it was needed. And for reference sake, we're the first in the country again to do that. We're doing it not because we wanted to show anything, but because we realized that we're at the epicenter, where all of these things started, and we needed to show leadership. We needed to show to our people that we're concerned and we're committed to all our staff. And so we pay that amount. But as we go along, we need to also review what our strategy is. Our strategy was at that time to contain the pandemic as soon as possible, to contain the pandemic before it gets onto community, to be able to attack it and deal with it. So we paid an allowance, in my view and in our view, that was actually rooftop. We actually paid people allowances that was like twice their salary, of their monthly salary. And you can go and check. We paid that allowance that was twice even some of them, because we thought it was going to be a pandemic that we can resolve within a month and a half. So let's deal with it. Everybody in the front line gets this allowance, gets, all of the motivation going, and let's deal with it. But however, all of us have seen that this has grown from being a sprint to being a marathon. So we needed to have a change in strategy, right? And so part of the strategy is let's keep the hazard allowance, on months in which we feel comfortable, we'll continue to pay it. And just last month again, we paid it, right? However, the COVID allowance, we needed to do proper enumeration. We needed to be sure that the people that were going to be paying the COVID allowance to were people that had worked during this COVID period and had worked in one or all of our isolation centers, right? So we had a 2-month delay, meaning that we paid 2 months, then we had not paid May and June. And the only reason was that we want to be sure that, because there were so many things that came out of there, we wanted to be sure that we're giving the right people this, because it was a lot of money. It was a lot of money, and so there were misgivings around that time. As I speak this morning, all of them, most of them, if not all of them, have got the allowance for the 2 months arrears. All of them. As we speak this morning, they've gotten it. So that is also been put behind us. What I pay in that one is really at my discretion, and it's even still more, much, much more than what the federal government, and when I'm not competing with anybody, what the federal government has paid as their COVID. In fact, twice, in some instances, on a monthly basis. And the figures are there in which you can go and check. The other concern that I heard was around taxes, right? Tax is a component of the law. You or I are not the one that set up tax. Tax is by the law of the federation. However, I've been hearing about taxes even when I was commissioner for Estab, and that was a long time ago, since 2008, 2009, right? So it's been a moving thing that, complaints about they are taxed more, they are taxed. And at that time, right, I think the former LRS chairman solved all of those problems. But of course, their salaries have since been improved over that time. So maybe the issue now is that they also still feel that maybe the salary is more. Taxation and salary deduction is a function of law, and there are things that are allowable, there are things that are not allowable. But even at that, we said, let's even further look at it. What savings, how much tax can I have taxed, an officer? Maybe at best, maybe it's 5,000, 7,000, 10,000 are these figures that we're talking about. And we said that once we call the chairman LIRS, we'll sit with them and they'll resolve. I cannot just take a unilateral decision on tax. It's a federal government law, it's the law of the Federation of Nigeria. So it cannot be at the whims and caprices of myself or anybody. It has to follow the law. And there is an independent body called LIRS, Lagos Inland Revenue Service, who needs to look at it, understand it, and be able to say that, okay, this is applicable, this is not applicable, and we'll do it. That's the second thing. The third thing was around residential quotas. So even if today, with all of best intentions, and we don't need to continue to say, with our best intentions, we have 2 developers that we have commissioned to even want to build accommodation for health workers. But even if we start today, minimum is 24 months because we have delivered that. So to build accommodation is not something that you say to me, I've not built, and I'll say to you, go to sleep and wake up, there's an accommodation there. These premises here, where we are now, there's a plan for us to develop doctors' quarters accommodation for. There is an international company that were working with us who had said they want to build part of our hospital for us. I said, no, don't build another hospital for me. Come and build doctors' quarters for me. And the design, as we're going on, is coming up. Same in Lasut. There's also a big private sector person that we're talking to. So that let's just keep them confidential. That has agreed that we'll also build doctors' quarters for them. But these quarters are not things that will happen in 1 week or 1 day. Space has to be aligned, designs have to be done, funds have to be available, and we said within 24 months we'll see it. Part of also some of the challenges, which I will also explain to you, is, okay, so what happened if I give a quarter to someone and he's working here, and 2 years after, the person leaves this particular hospital, goes to another hospital? The question I ask is, they don't want to leave that quarters. But that's for another day. So the quarters will come, it is government assets, and we'll create those assets for them. So it's not a problem. We've listened to it, and we've said that, far more, we cannot begin to tell you what and where our doctors are still. We don't need to, because that's our responsibility, and we don't need to look cheap or easy in front of you. We know what we're doing, and all of the things we've also committed to going forward. And I think the last case was around, no, okay, shortage of doctors. So we have a standing rule. On any exit of the health workers, they must replace. They don't even need sometimes to get my permission. It's a standing rule that we've had in. So because of the pandemic, there has been, over the last 6 months, about 600 to 700 health workers generally, nurses, doctors, hygienists, that have had to retire due to statutory time of retirement. And we've since given approval. COVID has kept all of us at home for the past 3 months. Is it not so? Civil service in Allowance, over 65% of them are still at home. I've given approval to recruit 760 health workers, of which 400 are doctors alone. Even the capacity to be able to identify the 400 doctors is also a challenge. And that process has started. They know. They've been carried along about this, and it's a process that has 760 health workers alone. It's only the health workers and teachers that have that standing rule to replace upon retirement. And because of COVID, that's what we're saying, that, I've given approvals, they are there, and the process has started with the Health Service Commission. And I think there's a last one which they said that we unceremoniously dismiss health workers that are working. I think it's rather unfortunate. All of our health workers, right, a 61% of them are also our workers that are working in our general hospitals. What we've seen, given the fact that we've changed our strategy, which I said, is that we realize that people are getting tired. A lot of doctors and health workers have had to work back to back over this period, and fatigue was setting in. And we said that let us do a change. Go back to your normal primary role, maybe in the general hospital or in a PHC. Go back there. Let us bring fresh hands again to come and help out, because we don't know for how long this thing was going to be around for. So initially, it was a case of, we just wanted this small team and put this thing to an end, but it hasn't gone. So we felt that we needed to retool them, re-energize them, and take the ones that have worked here for 3-4 months, take them back to their regular work, where we pay them, and we pay allowances there as well. The other that I talked about. Bring fresh doctors that are in our hospitals as well, bring them here and let them also come and work. So maybe the challenge was that because we hadn't paid those COVID allowance, which we have now since paid. So that's why I talked about also communication gap, because it was nothing. It was just a case of go back to your work in a general hospital and you still have gotten your COVID allowance because you work here. So it wasn't on ceremony, it was just a change of role. Go back, go and rest, let fresh hands come in and let them continue, to do the work. And those are some of the things that we've done. And I'm sure just so that we also don't unnecessarily belabor this thing, we have a dedicated isolation center for health workers at Agidimbi. Any health workers that fall sick, that test positive, they have their own dedicated isolation center. And it's been on for over 2 months. That we have for them, and they get well, they quarantine themselves, they don't need to go to their homes or infect themselves. And I'm sure over the last 4 months, we've had over 14 hotels where all our health workers have been staying. 14. All around Lagos. And we'll be feeding every day. 14 hotels. In Ikoyi, in Lekki, in Ikeja, all around here, Jibowu, all of them. Ask, you are investigative journalists, ask around. Just so to ensure that they are comfortable and will continue to keep all of the conversations well. Recently also, outside of the isolation center, we've also agreed a dedicated day for health workers who want to be tested. A dedicated day every week if you want to be tested. Whatever you feel like, you have a dedicated day. And we're doing all the testing. We have 5 laboratories. We have 7 from the private sector. And the numbers are there. You can walk in there. In fact, have another lab. This is another lab here that is going to go live. Inside here, this container is another lab. Meaning that inside this place, we have 2 labs. So, but like I said, I think the final thing they talked about was disparity between federal government and Lagos State. How can I, tiny me, be comparing myself with big federal government? How can? How can I? But even for information's sake, and I'm sure we celebrated it when we started, our minimum wage is higher than federal government. Hello? our minimum wage is higher than federal. So meaning across the public service, we actually pay more than federal government. But I don't need to go into this, issue around who does what. We understand what the requirements are. We know that Lagos, the living wage here or the living standard here is probably higher than a few other states around. And so for us, we said, let us do this. So we're actually doing more. So we've asked ourselves, show us those evidences. They said it's one particular level, level 14. You have service from level 6. They said, no, okay, it's entry level. How can we be juggling figures from one side to another and just be, if you have issues, let's look at the entire issues and let's solve it. You cannot say that, well, you're higher in level 9, I'm lower in level 14. You're higher in level 15, I'm lower in level. That's not discussion. And that's why I said that I'm not upset. There's absolutely nothing for me to be upset. You've seen that consistently the health workers are people that I have tremendous respect for, and they're doing a fantastic job. So we will always have issues around maybe misinformation or lack of information, or maybe the thing is maybe the commissioner is not always available every time they want to meet him. And the man has a difficult job to do. The man has a difficult job to do around this pandemic. So maybe those are just the issues. They said they meant to have met a meeting last week. It didn't happen last week, and so gentlemen of the press, it is rather unfortunate that my workers, who I love so dearly, would take this very unexpected line, to appeal their grievances. Grievances is natural. It's natural in any dispute. That yes, Mr. Governor, we have these issues. Yes, and it will start and end on the table. And so that's why when you ask what exactly is the point, tax, house, that cannot happen. What exactly is the point? Outstanding allowance, which I've paid, which I need not be held responsible for it, but which on my own volition I decided to, which is far more than every other person in the country. And it's rather unfair, and it's rather unfortunate that any of us, especially them at this time, want to take an opportunistic approach because of the pandemic system or the pandemic crisis we're going through. I think it's rather unfortunate, and I think it's totally condemnable. And I think I hold the system, as a chief incident commander, to express and to say to you that come back to work. I'm still your governor. Resume back to work. Whatever the issues are, we'll sort it out. I'm supposed to be father to all. And there's no better engagement we can have but on the table. But on all of the issues that you've raised, you will see that maybe you are not communicated to properly, but everything we've done. And by the way, 2 days ago, I even actually met with the leadership, 12 midnight, in my house. So, gentlemen of the press, there's not a lot to it, but I mean, what do you think? You have another question? Yes. We run an extremely very transparent government. Extremely very transparent government. So first to clarify the perception, the allowance we're talking about is the COVID additional allowance. It's not the hazard allowance. It's the COVID additional allowance, which I created at my own discretion. Which actually brought some problems, even with my other colleagues, which I created at my own discretion. Which I also mentioned to you that once we first paid it, it was like we were paying people 2x, 3x their salary. And we're like, what's going on? This thing, is not sustainable. And you can go and ask them how much these things were. 2-3 times in them as an allowance. We said it was not, this pandemic is going to be with us for a long time. So let us sit down and let us even identify who are the real needs. Because what was now happening was that everybody was coming around. The PAMSECs are here. I gave them that assignment. Go and do a proper audit assessment of who should qualify. So this is outside of their regular job, and they're here. I kept asking Dr. Boye, where are you on that? And he says he wants to do a good job. I cannot crucify my officer who wants to do a good job, for that matter. So he said to me 4 times, 5 times, Oga, I'm doing a good job. There are 14 pillars in the EOC. He had to go around all of the 14 pillars. We're talking of over 1,000 people in different parts of the country, of the state, which are not the regular staff in the health facilities for COVID-19 specifically. So he needed to do that, and he needed to be sure. And so part of the things that you generate is that you generate the real name, the real account number, the real bank, because it's out of their salary. It's not in their payroll. This is a separate, so we needed to get that analysis right so that we're not paying an amount for Mr. A to Mr. B, and we're not paying wrong amount. So it took them time to review all of that. The second point, which you're now asking, is why is it the day they went on strike that we paid it? I gave the approval since last week. NIMS, I'm sorry to mention their name. NIMS is an international name. There was some glitch over the weekend. They were informed that these things were coming on Friday. There was a glitch in the system. It's transfer. Everybody today, you don't write a check for anyone. It's supposed to be an online transfer. And so that was what happened. It was meant to be an online. And when they came to me, which I told you now, when they came to me on Friday or Saturday night, at 12:30 midnight, I called the accountant general and I put him on speaker. Exactly what I said to them earlier was exactly what the man repeated on the phone. What better transparency do you want? In my office at 12:30 midnight, I woke the man up and I put him on speaker and said, tell me what had happened in the last 48 hours. And he said exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing on speakerphone. It's on record. So it's not about, I don't have to look good. I'm the father to all. I have a responsibility to the state. I don't need to, but because of my passion and my sense of responsibility, understanding how it works, that's what we're doing. We're the only ones, by the way, with the consortium of our corporate friends, that have also given them, each person here, an insurance cover outside of the global insurance cover that the state has. Additional insurance cover for COVID-19 workers. And in which amounts of, in the event of fatality, in the event of injury, amounts are there. I don't need to mention the amount to you. A certificate for each person. So it's not a grandstanding thing. It's not something that I want to look good. It's transparently communicating to you. And that's important.